inicialmente até uma ideia que surgiu.
Initially, we thought of just giving up everything, giving up all the businesses. But then, thinking about Ayrton's wishes, he had talked about making some sort of social contribution in a more organized way than he had done before, because he used to be very discreet about it. So we decided to continue all the projects that had already been started and to use his image to help people, even after his death, just as he had helped people before, especially in Brazil, just by being himself through his values and attitudes. Ayrton was a person who cared very much about quality, organization, and doing things in the best way possible. That's why he had the idea of setting up an institution, and the logical thing to do was to set up a foundation.
A lógica foi fazer uma fundação.
In 1988, the partnership between Senna and Ron Dennis at McLaren had begun. Lotus had given him pole positions and victories, but McLaren gave him a championship chance, and that year he'd take it after an acrimonious battle with teammate Alain Prost. And Ayrton was equally determined to establish himself among the highest earners in the sport. When it came to contract negotiations, he was a determined opponent for Ron Dennis, who can claim at least one victory.
He was incredibly tough, even in those early days. In the end, we just came to a complete stalemate over the last $500,000. So I suggested that we actually flicked a coin for the $500,000. He didn't even understand what that meant, and on having it explained that this was just purely the simplest way to break the deadlock, I then had to draw pictures of a head and a tail to be absolutely sure that there was no doubt as to the interpretation. And so we literally wrote on a piece of paper the rules of this very simple thing, because he still didn't have a complete command of the English language. And I won the toss, as it were, which he never ever forgave me for, and I paid 1,000,000 times for that. I owe 1,000,000 times. It was only about 10 days later that it suddenly dawned on him that in fact it wasn't $500,000, it was in fact $1.5 million, because it was a 3-year contract.
I have had all my life a very, very strong and good education. And from that education I have got, again, clear and strong principles in way of behaving. And that's where I'm guided for. I use those lines and those guidelines to move as a man, as a professional. And I don't regret anything. I just feel I'm doing things for the right reason. Some understand, some don't. In the end, you never get everybody to understand and to agree and to accept. But most of them, I'm sure, admire, after all, what I'm doing as a professional and as a man. And as many drivers do, we are exposing our lives, they are consistent. And the reason for it is only one, is to succeed, is to win, is to get the thrill when you cross the finish line in first place.
When you're in a racing car, there is nothing allowed. You don't hear the crowd, you don't see them in the same way as a tennis player, a golf player, and an athlete or anybody else does. And it's a magic carpet.
It isn't just the speed of thought, it is the anticipation of what's coming. I mean, when you come into a corner, you've got to know what you're going to do. You don't drive a corner round the corner, you drive a corner before you get there. In other words, you set the car up, you say, look, this is what we're going to do, and then you compensate on the throttle, and you compensate through the steering, but to a relatively small amount. You have got to come in knowing what you're going to do. You've got to be programmed. And I think that he had the finest chip going, and it was just programmed. Every corner he'd come into, he had the darn thing programmed, and yet, if he had to make a decision in the middle of it, he had the talent to be able to throw the car from one position to another and catch it and hold it and control it.
he seemed to be talking about, well, the road just does this a little bit here in the corner, and then there's a bit that drops away there. And when he described the car, he was describing the contours of the road in every minute detail, and the way the car behaved.
The worst is the second chicane and in the third chicane. But it's because the asphalt goes like this, in the third chicane, and it's like this. In the second chicane you're coming bumpy, and then it's like you go against the ground basically, and the car is really down. You get low grip. It's tough.
And it must have been, to him, like everything was much. It was a sort of slow. It seemed like it was recording in slow motion, and that was fascinating to listen to.
Although I spent 6 years racing against Ayrton in Formula One, it really wasn't until I joined McLaren as a test driver in 1990 that I had the chance to see exactly how fast he was and exactly how he did it. Now, in those days, we go to a European circuit like Monza or Estoril for a 3-day test, and normally I do the first day or two pounding around, getting down to what I thought was a very respectable time before Senna came along, and within 10 laps he would have been a second faster. So how did he do it? Looking at the pictures, it's hard to see. But if we look at data recordings showing just how the driver is using the controls, examples of Senna's technique can be seen. Looking first at braking into a corner, the blue line shows me braking. Compare this with the red line of Ayrton, clearly showing that here he doesn't brake as hard or for as long. The result is that he's going faster into the corner. On acceleration out of the corner, Senna's unique technique is equally obvious. Whereas I would progressively increase the throttle opening, Ayrton would immediately start stabbing at it, pushing to get his foot hard down earlier, and therefore exit faster too. Putting both of these together means that with this example, he pulls out 0.2 of a second through this section alone, and that's just one small part of the whole lap.
But where he was, let's say, mercurial in his driving was that he had the ability, from the moment the light went to green, to be on the pace instantly. A number of drivers tend to take the first lap, let's say, a little bit cautiously, because they haven't got the tyre temperatures maybe up to their full operating temperature. The car's been sitting in the grid for a short period. The tyre pressures likewise. So there's a tendency for drivers to be just that little bit cautious to make sure that the feelings that they have got give them confidence. Senna didn't need that. He was able to go 100% on the opening lap. And if you can do that and open an advantage in the early laps, it demoralizes your opponents, and it gives you then that little bit of barrier between yourself and the cars following. And I think the best example I saw of that, certainly in recent years, was at last year's European Grand Prix at Donington Park.
If I take one lap of all the Grand Prix that I have seen over the years to my grave with me, it's going to be the first lap of the Donington Grand Prix, the European Grand Prix of 1993. When Senna started from 4th on the grid, he didn't make a very good start, he dropped back to 6th, but he was first at the end of the first lap.
Prost gets away well, so does Hill, so does Schumacher. And Wendlinger is coming up well. Senna is crowded out and is down to 5th position. And Wendlinger is up into 3rd place ahead of Schumacher. Brilliant start by the Austrian driver in the black Sauber. Prost leads, Hill 2nd, Wendlinger is 3rd. And Ayrton Senna is up to 4th position ahead of Schumacher and challenging Wendlinger as they go round the right-hander into the old hairpin. Senna is up to 3rd.
And after being crowded at the start, a quite brilliant couple of corners by Ayrton Senna. Tremendous stuff. He muscled his way back into the contention at Redgate. He's going inside Damon Hill. And Senna into 2nd place already. And he's giving it absolutely everything in the wet part of the race.
And Senna goes through into the lead. He's passed Alain Prost, so the McLaren leads. Prost 2nd, Hill is 3rd. A tremendous gap between the 3rd and 4th cars.
Senna going away, but I expect that Damon Hill will be looking for a way past his team leader Alain Prost, who doesn't like the wet and won't be in a hurry.
It was great. It was great. We lapped everybody.
Yeah.
And we could have won the race with one lap over everybody. It didn't happen in the end because we just slowed down, but it could have been that way. So I don't remember a Grand Prix that was won in such a style. And there you go. It was one of these days that everything came together between the driver and the team and the circumstances on the circuit, the pit stops, the information, the strategy, and there you put together this incredible, fascinating result.